Hi. Welcome to Aniprime Recap. His strength is enormous and his only goal is to get into a wizard school without having any mastery over magic. We are in the anime, Mashly, first season, episodes 1, 2, and 3. In a world of sorcery, all people are graced with the use of magic. This power is used to move heavy objects and even fly brooms through the city. The inhabitants are so used to this that seeing dragons in the sky is commonplace. However, far from civilization, a young man lives with his grandfather in a house in the middle of the forest. Every day the protagonist performs several series of physical training sessions to increase his strength even more. His grandfather, Regro Berndide, tries to lead a quiet life, but this turns out not to be possible. Mash Berndide always acts disastrously. First thing in the morning, the young man didn't know how to open the door of the house, so he ripped it open without much effort, and this caused his grandfather a huge fury. The protagonist apologizes and says he will fix it, but when he tries to leave again, he destroys the door even more. After this incident, Regro asks if the young man has already done his daily training, and the young man says yes, but questions him as to the reason for forcing him to do only physical training. The old man doesn't tell the young man, but he keeps in mind that his grandson has no magical powers, and with this in mind, he compensates for his lack of magical powers with his physical strength. Regro tells him that he is going out and asks the young man to stay at home, and under no circumstances is he to go into town alone. The protagonist obeys the orders, but he believes that there is no sacrifice without reward, and for this reason he runs into town in search of buying his favorite delicacy. He wears a cape that covers even a part of his face, and when he arrives in civilization, the young man notices that people are always using their magical powers to do everything from something basic to work activities. Mash wants to buy their delicious profiteroles, a sugary pastry with a filling inside. He hands the seller the coins, but due to his anxiety to eat the sweet, he ends up bending all the coins in his hand. The young man apologizes and untangles all the coins with his strength alone, an act that makes the vendor even more distressed. Suddenly a gale makes Mash's face show. People soon observe him and wonder why the young man's face is different. Later that morning, the magical police department receives a report about someone who did not have the mark on his face. Brad Coleman is the authority who receives the information. The man was about to use his magic to punish one of the prisoners, but decides to go to the town to find out about what happened. Meanwhile, Mash is walking normally through the streets, and wherever he goes, people are watching him and are frightened by what they see. The protagonist, while walking distracted, bumps into a policeman of the magical force, and he ends up dirtying the man's clothes with one of his profiteroles. Terry was in the middle of his workday and totally drunk. He insults the young man for dirtying his police uniform and throws on the floor one of the candies that Mash was carrying. The protagonist tries to apologize and even offers one of his candies to the policeman, but he just keeps yelling, so the young man takes off the officer's uniform with only his strength and informs him that he will wash it. Just then, Brad arrives on the scene, and before he can confront the young man's grandfather appears at high speed and takes his grandson back home as fast as he can. The policeman does not give up and uses his magic wand to conjure a bird, which flies around town in search of the whereabouts of the two subjects. At the forest house, Regro argues with Mash for having disobeyed him. The old man reflects that even though his grandson possesses incredible physical strength, he always acts in a gentle manner. As punishment, the grandfather asks Mash to repeat his daily training again, and before the young man can go out the door, Regro acts quickly and opens it himself to avoid another accident. Mash walks calmly towards the forest and his grandfather becomes thoughtful, because he always hid the young man in that place to avoid problems with the townspeople, but he knew that at some point his grandson's curiosity would be greater and he would have to deal with it. At that moment, the old man looks out the window of his house and notices that a magical bird was spying on him, and then 3 policemen destroy the wall of the house in search of Mash. Meanwhile, the protagonist was performing his physical training in the forest and even the animals living nearby were amazed. He took his training so seriously that he finished his sets in less than 5 minutes. The young man then returns home and upon arriving at the door he hears a strange conversation between his grandfather and some strangers. Regro was being pressured to report the young man's location. The old man receives several blows and magical attacks, but refuses to reveal himself in any way. While being attacked, he recalls that since his childhood he was humiliated by his own parents because his power was weak, suffered from insults in his work environment, and was called worthless by everyone he met. One night, determined to put an end to all the suffering he was going through, he heard a baby crying and realized that they had abandoned a newborn baby just because the little one did not have the mark. At that moment, Regro had discovered his true purpose. He took that young boy to himself and cared for him as if he were his own son. From that day on, his life took on a different meaning. After taking several blows, the old man yells for Mash to flee the scene. Policeman Brad soon realizes that the young man must be nearby and asks his companions to investigate the house to find him. The policeman is annoyed by the old man's yelling and carries a magic to eliminate him right there, but before he could act, Mash destroys the door and throws a powerful punch at one of the policemen. Then the young man tears again the uniform of the policeman he found in town and slaps him several times on the face. The protagonist says quietly that he is going to send those policemen straight to hell. Brad wastes no time and begins his attack. He conjures a high-level magic capable of defeating a dragon. The man fires the energy ball in the direction of his opponent and a great impact occurs. However, Brad realizes that the young man rebounds the sphere with just a slap. The man becomes enraged and conjures the spell several times in Mash's direction. The protagonist, on the other hand, unintentionally plays with the situation. He juggles with the energy spheres and even does some dribbling with the power thrown at him. Finally, Mash asks permission to use his grandfather's magic wand and prepares to make an attack. Brad acts quickly and conjures a shield of protection that says he is not afraid of the attack, because the young man is not able to conjure any spells. The protagonist concentrates the force in his hands and fires his wand in the direction of the policeman. The object reaches such an absurd speed that it destroys the magic shield, slightly wounding Brad's face. The young man's grandfather and the policeman are impressed by the size of Mash's strength, so Brad tries to make an offer to the unmarked young man. He says that every year a student is chosen by God and given the title Divine Visionary. Brad asks Mash to enter a school of magic and obtain the title, so society will finally accept him. However, the policeman says that he wants in return the privileges, money and bonuses that the title receives. Regro immediately asks his grandson not to accept the proposal, because it was clearly a trap. Brad then says that if the young man doesn't accept, he will be hunted for his entire life. Mash thinks for a few seconds and decides to accept. He tells his grandfather that his motivation is much greater than all this, and, furthermore, he wishes to live a peaceful life by his side. The young man now stands in front of the magic school and says that if he cannot live a life of peace, he will beat the crap out of everyone who interferes with his goal. The protagonist is preparing to take the entrance test to the Easton School of Magic, a prestigious place where only the best wizards can get in. This is because the pass rate is less than 3%. Claude Lucci, one of the school's instructors, attentively observes the new participants who will take the entrance exam. However, Claude sees that one of the candidates is in the middle of the courtyard practicing physical training with various weights. The instructor wonders if this is an illusion, because he cannot believe that someone with even the slightest intelligence would prefer physical training to gaining more magical knowledge. Next, the man is amazed to see that the young man was sitting in an invisible chair while reading a book about physical exercise. Furthermore, Claude observes that two strange men are watching the participant. A few moments later, the instructor makes his triumphant introduction and says that he will be the exam coordinator. The prospective students fear his presence and revere him for his incredible power to master high-level magic, except Mash, who sees nothing much to it. Claude conjures tables for the participants to take the first exam. It will be a written test, but the sheets have a spell that causes the letters to move involuntarily, impairing the understanding of the questions. Regro and Brad, who are watching the young man, believe that this is the end for Mash, as the participants would have to use magic to rearrange the letters. However, the protagonist begins to feel anger as he sees the letters moving from side to side. He begins to lose patience and even breaks his pen, at which point the letters are afraid of the young man and organize themselves of their own accord. The first test is over and Mash is the first to complete the mission. Claude is impressed, because he couldn't imagine that this stranger would make it past the first evaluation. As time goes on, the protagonist performs other trials that required magic with just his physical strength, from carrying a huge rock with just one finger, to running on water at such a high speed that it was impossible for him to sink. Claude begins to get annoyed with the bizarre young man's achievements, so he decides to apply one more test. He conjures up a huge labyrinth and tells the participants that they must reach the end within a certain time, and if they don't, they will be eliminated. Mash was getting ready to start the test, but before he does, a girl approaches him and asks if they can form a duo. After all, it will be easier to pass through the obstacles in the maze with the help of another person. The protagonist accepts the proposal and begins the journey with Lemon Irvine. The girl acts shy and throughout the route she is attacked by demons, being trapped by hands that come out of the ground, falling into an absurd crater. However, Mash at all times does absolutely nothing, just observes the dangerous situations and wonders if it was really a good idea to form a duo. The girl becomes enraged after going through several threats and immobilizes the protagonist with some iron restraints. Irvine says that she has her reasons for preventing the young man from completing the test, and that is why she has fooled him all this time. Mash, on the other hand, doesn't care about that and destroys the objects that held him back and goes on his way to finish the test. Irvine laments that she cannot trap her target, but before the girl can finish the test, the guardian of the labyrinth appears in her path, a frightening Egyptian giant. The creature presents a riddle to the girl, and if she does not answer, she will be eliminated. Irvine is so afraid that she can't think of anything and just waits for her end. The guardian then draws his staff and strikes a blow against the girl, but before he can complete his attack, Mash returns to the scene and strikes the monster with his powerful punch. The protagonist says that he doesn't know why Irvine acted this way, but states that if it is something like her ambition, he feels sorry for her. A few minutes before the test ended, Claude was happy to realize that Mash had not completed the test. After all, he was the one who conjured up the guardian and recruited Irvine to hinder the young man. However, everyone starts to hear a tremor coming from the maze. The examiner says that the walls are more than 1 meter thick and it would be impossible for someone to destroy them easily, but Mash went his own way and burst through the walls until he reached the end of the test. The other participants find this attitude insulting, because with the breaking of the walls, it was no longer a labyrinth. They say that it is not fair for someone to finish the test in this way. Mash didn't take any offense. The young man just felt a strong desire to leave that place. Irvine tries to defend him and says that she is the one who should be eliminated, because she received a direct offer from the examiner Claude to prevent Mash from being able to complete the test, so that she would earn her ticket to enter the School of Magic. She further says that the young man proposed to her while they were trapped in the labyrinth. However, Mash says that this did not happen at all. Irvine got a few words mixed up and now thinks she may have a new romantic partner. Claude doesn't care about any of this and says that by obtaining the title of examiner, he decides who will pass the tests and therefore intends to eliminate the duo that is causing him trouble. The professor concentrates his energy and prepares to finish off the two rebels. The protagonist acts quickly and destroys his examiner's magic wand with just one hand. Everyone is frightened by it, and even Rogue and Brad believe that this is the end. At that moment, Principal Wahlberg appears on the scene and says that from that moment on, he will take over as the examiner for the final exam. The old man says that he will take action regarding Professor Claude's behavior. Next, Wahlberg begins the last test for admission, which is an interview. The first to be interviewed is Mash, and the young man is teleported to a room where his answers would be judged by several of the institution's professors. The school principal asks him why he wanted to enter the Easton School of Magic and why he decided to help the girl who was trying to hurt him in the last exam. Mash responds with no motivation at all, provoking a great deal of rejection from the teachers, so Wahlberg tries to evaluate the participant in another way that would show his real intentions. The old man releases his gigantic magical energy and conjures up a curse. The director brings to that place a cloth doll and a drilling mechanism, revealing that the soul of the person dearest to Mash would be placed inside the doll. In that instant, Regro has his soul removed from his body and placed inside the doll. Next, Wahlberg says that the piercing mechanism will be activated and in a few seconds will pierce the dummy with a pointed spear, so the soul of the person inside the dummy will be completely destroyed. Then the spear begins to descend slowly toward the doll, and Mash tries to stop it. The young man throws a strong punch in the direction of the sharp object, but instead of destroying it, he injures himself. He thinks for a few seconds and places his hands against the spear, preventing it from continuing to advance. Although the object pierces his hand, he explains that this is not a test of strength, but of endurance. Upon hearing this, Wahlberg undoes his magic and returns Regro's soul to his body. The old man says he is happy with the young man's attitude and congratulates him for getting into the Easton School of Magic. Mash, on the other hand, keeps his cool and tells the principal that if he does this to his grandfather again, he will break his face. The protagonist made it through all the challenges and finally became an official student, but on his first day of class he already aroused the fury of his teachers. In class, Mash was told by his teacher to use a simple spell to open a padlock, but the young man simply opened the object by force. As classes end, the students get to know their dormitories, and Finn Ames, one of the students in the class, just wishes he didn't share the same room with the violent newcomer, but as he faces his new quarters, he realizes that the door is not in place. At this moment he realizes that unfortunately he is going to share a dormitory with the person he least wanted. The two young men introduce themselves and Finn realizes that Mash is not so violent. After all, he talks in a calm manner. Mash then asks how one could become a divine visionary at school. Finn replies that the title can be obtained by means of gold coins. To get them, the student only needs to obtain high grades in activities and exams. The coins do not function as money and are divided into the categories of gold, silver and bronze. In exchange for the information, the protagonist offers a profiterole to his new roommate, and so the two students get along and prepare to face the next challenges at magic school. The next day, everyone is instructed to take a flying lesson with their magic broom. The teacher says that the students must transfer part of their magic power to the object so that they can fly freely through the sky. Most of the students manage to transfer their energy to their brooms, but Mash suffers from his condition of having no power at all, at which point one of the students realizes the young man's difficulty and begins to make fun of his problem. The protagonist is then challenged to a broomstick race. Mash, although at a complete disadvantage, accepts the proposed challenge. The two take their positions and the teacher gives the signal for the contest to begin. Mash disappears before everyone's eyes and leaves his teacher amazed at what has just happened. Finn reveals that Mash threw his broomstick at the starting signal and then jumped on it. The protagonist used the air resistance to calibrate the speed, allowing him to perform a precise flight. Upon returning to the starting place, the young man who challenged Mash accuses him of cheating and says he will make him regret it, but before he could do anything, his mouth is closed with magic. Lloyd Cavill, a student feared by all, is responsible for this. He asks the newcomer to meet him at that place after school ends. The sinister student takes the young man who challenged the novice to a secluded place and says that the mission was only to cause embarrassment to Mash, but this is not what happened. As punishment for not fulfilling his objective, Lloyd punches the young man several times in the face. In the hallways of the school, Finn explains that Lloyd is the son of an official of the Bureau of Magic, and this body dictates all the rules about spells, being absolute and unquestionable. In addition, the young man also has ties to the vice principal, so he has the power to get any student expelled. For this reason all the students are afraid of him and what he can do. That afternoon, Mash was working on a recipe for profiteroles and forgot to meet the bully. The next day, in class, Lloyd approaches the young man and makes him an offer. He says he knows of the novice's desire to become a visionary, and so he will help him with his objective, but first Mash will have to obey all his orders. The protagonist accepts immediately, and as the days go by, he is forced to perform various tasks. Lloyd takes advantage of the newcomer's goodwill and even spills a glass of water on the floor and asks Mash to clean up. While walking through the halls of the school with his group, Lloyd asks Finn to set Mash's clothes on fire, but the young man refuses. When his order is denied, Lloyd conjures magic threads that bind the young man's body and brings him to his knees, causing him to hit his head on the ground as an apology. Mash tries to look for Finn until he finds him injured. The young man tells him that he was responsible for tearing his friend's book and apologizes for acting this way. He says he did it because he was threatened by Lloyd. The protagonist had noticed his torn book earlier and now understands everything. Mash then walks towards the bully and slams his face into the ground as hard as he can, forcing him to apologize to Finn. The young man faints from the hard blow he received and everyone is startled by the newcomer's attitude. The vice principal, Farman, arrives on the scene and gets angry with the students who were present for not defending Lloyd. However, Mash acts on impulse and attacks the man, then digs a hole with his hands and puts the subject trapped inside. Farman Kregos threatens the protagonist for his acts of insanity, but Mash replies that even if that is the end for him and his actions lead him to prison, he can always bury Farman. A few minutes later, the protagonist is taken to talk directly with the director. The old man says that he has received a letter from the Bureau of Magic requesting Mash's expulsion for his violent acts, yet Wahlberg decides to let the young man go unpunished. The old man says that nowadays people in the elite are becoming selfish and think they can control everything and everyone, but he claims that the newcomer has a kind heart and therefore will not be expelled. The principal burns the letter and explains that the only way for Mash to become a visionary is to be number one in every school, but he would have to score high marks in his exams to get the gold coins. Thus, the protagonist gets away with it, after beating the son of an elite visionary and burying the vice principal. Due to Mash's actions, his name became recognized throughout the school and even a teacher invited him to participate in a project where first-year students were rarely invited. Tom Knowles tells the young man to join his team, where they would participate in a sport similar to quadribol, in the greatest Harry Potter style, but on the day of the game, Mash says he can't fly with his broomstick. How will Mash participate in the tournament without magic and without the ability to fly? So, what did you think of this anime? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like it and subscribe for more anime recaps. See you next time.